Hello Cosplay, we're back and we're going to be filling imperfections in XPS foam, that is to say, pink foam, rigid insulation foam, yes. This is not preparing it to be painted or primed. That's a different set of materials I will go into in a separate video. This is just fixing and making sure your surfaces are nice and smooth for that next step of preparing it to be painted, because the foam is fidgety and sometimes you just need a little bit more work to prepare it for that kind of stuff. Now, some of you may be old pros and you might have recognized this company, Foam Coat, or the Highwire Foam Factory. They produce quite a few products for this material. We bought things from them once, and then once we figured out what exactly they were doing, we never bought them from again. Indeed, a lot of their products can be produced from regular retailers at a considerably lower price. Their tools are not very cost effective, and the materials are essentially repackaged goods. As I may demonstrate, here is a 6-lits container with the same thing. You can buy these containers, and here's catnip in the same exact container here. As well as these containers may look familiar to you. These are different textured sands to give foam different textures as advertised, but not particularly useful. These are white glues and thinning for white glues, and you can find all these things at a considerably lower prices elsewhere. So I do use this sand for bases for miniatures, but otherwise it's completely it's been around for many years and still not used. If that's indication is how much we approve of their products. And as you might know, I do quite a lot of work with foam, so that's pretty telling. So when you cut into foam, you may have a texture that's like this, if I can get the shading to get right. There we go. Kind of a rough texture there with little burrs and things like that. That's perfectly normal and to be expected, I guess. If you can cut a little nicer, say like this, that's even better. Right, good job. But when you're sculpting and shaping, there can, or there will be, very likely, points where you have divots and imperfections in the surface itself. And you tend to want to sand those out and make it as nice as possible, but you don't want to sand so much as to remove the details and the bulk of the material in entirety. And indeed, if you've got like a hole like this in your work, you're pretty much going to have to fill that, otherwise you're going to have to start with a new piece. Typically with XPS foam, you want to try and work the material to its benefit. That means using it to make very large light props or armor, or whatever the case may be, accessories, wigs even I've seen. So it's a weight-saving material in most cases, and it's sculptable. Also, if I haven't mentioned it, wear a mask when you're using this. Wear a mask. Obviously, you don't want these burrs and things in your lungs because they're bad. Oh well. So, the standard way of working with it is with either a this does a lot of the bulk work, and then to get things done quickly for sanding, and then you work with a rasp. Let me see if I can find a rasp. Here's a rasp. Here's a rasp right here, and a file to work with more details. You can always go in with such things and do detail work, but again, remember to keep in mind the stuff in the air. But I prefer to finish things up if I can with some sandpaper or a sanding sponge or a sanding tool. Typically, before I even think about filling or finishing or anything like that, I try to get it at least to this level of sanding finish. Obviously, we've got some scratches in here I want to fix, but for this example, I'm going to leave them because we want to fix them up right. Now, there's typically 3 stages for me to fix a hole. The big hole, obviously, is going to have to be dealt with first, and hopefully it's not nearly this dramatic for your work, because that's a huge hole in my book. But they do exist, and what we use to fill them? Plaster of Paris. We're going to go with, of course, as non-acidic or damaging to the foam as possible. And plaster of Paris is one of those materials. You can use I guess caulk or silicone or any other filler, but those tend to be heavier. And in fact, this is a gypsum powder. This is actually not that bad, but the plaster Paris is a little bit cheaper to use, and I just never got around to using this. I guess I'd use it for bases sometimes, but it's gypsum powder essentially. You can find those in your local hardware store, just in bags. In fact, I think they sell it for tiling and well, there you go. So here we go, we got a nice powder, and typically I would mix it up in a bigger cup than this, but because this is only an example, I'm going to be using this little cup. And let me get this out of the way, and let me get this out of the way. I try to use just I guess an eighth of the volume per water to get the job done, if that makes sense. Just work, if I need to work more water into it, I can. And I pour this into. This is a little different than casting. You might see some tutorials online for casting with plaster Paris. This is a different kind of purpose, so we're going to mix it differently. We're going to mix it much looser. We're not going to let it sit around and let the air bubbles work out of it or anything, because we want that work time to be as long as possible. Now, depending on how you feel about it, this is going to take your personal experience with it. You're going to make it into a consistency that you like. Now, this is pretty thin. This is what I typically use on a facing such as this to kind of give it to fill those holes. At least fill the larger ones, like so. I try to start with a thinner mix and then work my way up. And then, actually, it doesn't matter. I could be using a sponge brush for this too. Using a sponge brush obviously gives you a different texture when you're working with it over a traditional brush. Now, what you may or may not be seeing is that it's already starting to get thicker. It's going to do that. You have, I don't know, a few minutes of work time. So the thing I like to do is fill in the smaller imperfections and then start working my way into the larger ones. This is because the plaster Paris is naturally going to start thickening up, and therefore as I work I no longer have the option of working into the smaller imperfections. So I get those done first while I have the ability to do so. And actually it's a little too thin. I'm working a little too quickly here. So there we go. Maybe I should give this a little bit more time to thicken up. But that's the basic idea. Can it sit level? No, it doesn't want to sit level. Sit level. Nope. Even less level. Shoot. Oh well. So there's the basic idea there. Now, actually, I'm going to pour this out because I need to work with this piece of foam a bit, and it's just going to fill in. So essentially, I would wait for that to harden, and then I would address it at that point differently. And I am making a mess on my example table piece of MDF pegboard. Okay, let me. All right. So gypsum works in a similar fashion. Same rules pretty much apply. You mix water, or you can even mix white glues in there to give it a much thicker consistency. And then adding different sort of solidifiers so will affect it differently. You can make it rubbery. You can make it more rigid, more fragile, I suppose. Depending on what you add it to, and that's what Foam Factory did. Typically, white glue will make it a little bit more bouncy. Adding things like acrylic medium will make it very, very flexible. Okay, so those are for our big holes. Now let's just kind of pretend that I filled that big hole because I don't have time to do this all on video. Sorry, guys. So what do we do about the medium holes, such as this? Well, the medium holes I address with wood filler. I found that wood filler is a reasonable price and gets the job done in a nice way. This is for more specifically EPS foam, or yeah, EPS foam. You can get it to work with other, say, other materials like plastics and woods, but it may flake off a little easier. You might want to try Bondo for other mediums. This is just for like EPS and EVA foam. Actually, not really EVA foam either. You want to do different things with EVA foam, because it's more flexible. The reason why you don't want to use plaster Paris and wood filler and these other things with EVA foam is that this is a very rigid material, and if you use it with a flexible material, it's pretty much going to crack out of its out of the material. Just the different the texture or consistencies won't let them work together once they're fully cured. You'll end up with a shell that's fairly easy to remove, or brittle cracking parts. I'm not saying it's impossible to use, but I have other better options I feel work really well. So here we go. I'm going to be going in and filling those in as best I can. I'm going to try not to use more than I need to, because that's just going to have to be sanded off later. The same thing is true here. I don't really want to put more than I need. That's just going to be sanded off later. Okay, there we go. Okay, and sometimes I'll have to come in later and fill those holes in just a bit more after I've done the initial filling, the initial fill, because the plaster Paris or the wood filler is just too soft to completely finish in this, into a smooth surface. So I just come in later and fix it up with another application. Yay! Now, this is I said for medium problems. This is for large issues. This is for medium issues. Well, what do you do with the very, very fine finishing issues? For the very, very fine, if you use a little bit, gypsum might work if you have it very, very fine powder gypsum. But what I found to work the best is this product called Magicoat. You can find this at Hobby Lobby, and it is pretty much the same thing, but it has some mediums in there, and it has some additives. I'm almost out of this, so that shows that I've been using it quite a lot. Let me come on baby, give me some. I really should have got a new bottle. Oh well. Let me get some from the bottle, because I think it's almost done. There we go. Okay, so it's just like pretty much the ones we've been using before, but it's very, very fine stuff. It's almost more of the medium than the actual gypsum, but as you can see, it does almost nothing to these larger imperfections. This is for your fine work and finishing it off at the very end. To try and fill one of these holes with Magicoat is a complete waste of time. This is just to make, this is a fine finisher. If you can see, there's a texture on the facing of the EPS itself. That actually might be something it could take care of. It's smoothing out that texture. And this is definitely something you want a sponge brush or a traditional brush for, because it will affect that. Also, clean out these quickly, otherwise they'll turn brittle and it'll pretty much ruin the brush when you're doing this kind of work. And you can also save a sponge brush in a similar way if you clean out with water before it's fully set or setting. But there we go. Let me see if I can work that in. You can see it's a much thinner sort of paste, almost, or yeah. But it will fill in the really, really fine imperfections. So if you're looking for a very fine sort of texture, this is the way to go. In the picture, they kind of do a really sloppy decoupage thing. I have no idea what they're thinking there. But if you take your time with it, it can make considerably better finishes for you there. There you are. These are just fillers. Remember, just fillers. These are not for finishing. If you want to make sure your foam is safe for adding, say, a fiberglass coating or spray painting, this will not work. Spray paint will soak in through this and it will eat right through it. So we want to finish that differently. But for fixing these holes, and well, theoretically this one, if I'd let it set properly, there's more time to work it. That's the way to go. And I think this is already kind of, yeah, this is already starting to become much more less workable. Oh well. I hope you guys get the idea behind this. It's the same idea as sanding. You work your way from the larger imperfections to the smaller ones. You start with a very rough sandpaper and then you work your way down to a fine sandpaper. So you fill the larger gaps and then you move in and fill the smaller gaps. Well, kind of, whatever, you understand the strategy with the plaster Paris, hopefully. I hope this was a reasonable example of how I fill my EPS foam. You don't want to overdo it because, of course, the more of this filler you use, the heavier your prop, armor, accessory, whatever the case may be, will be. So that initial sanding, the initial making sure it's reasonable finish, is going to be very important before you start any of this work. So just doing a bit of sanding and finishing will save you all this time and effort in finishing it with these other materials. Sorry, not finishing, fixing it with these other materials. But if you have imperfections in your surface, this, I hope, will help you with that. I will hit this button with my kind of covered with plaster of Paris finger. Thanks for watching, guys. Hey, well, before I finish up this video, I want to say thanks for everyone who likes and subscribes. But the people who comment, you guys have a special place in my heart. It really does keep me motivated. I don't know, I do try to talk to you a one-on-one, but maybe someday I'll have enough questions and so on to do like a regular Monday Q&A session like I used to. But for now, I just try and spread the information and love I have for all you cosplayers out there. I don't know if you know someone who needs help, if you see someone who could use a heads up and maybe is new to the cosplay community, maybe hasn't seen some of these kind of informational videos, let them know. It really helps me out. I'm gonna go make more vids, have some fun, make some stuff, do cosplay things. Thanks for watching, guys. Good times to all.